So today is August 6th, 2026, and thank you everybody for being here at Prime Hour. We are recording now, and thank you for sharing your contact information in the chat so that we can make our conversation and continue with building our community. Today, we are going to talk about when and if and how and should we stretch the vision of our clients, our world vision of our clients. What is that about? Is this a coaching skill? Should we do that? What's going to happen? So we're going to be talking a little bit about that and being able to support each other on this. And hopefully we'll also have a moment to go into smaller groups and breakout rooms so that we can chat with each other as well. As you know, Prime Hour is all about sharing and sharing our stories, sharing our perspectives so that we can learn from each other. So feel free to interrupt us at any moment. Amy, where do we get started?
Let me give some context to this. So this goes, I'm not sure I would use the word stretch as much as disrupt somebody's worldview. And I hope this is a juicy topic for all of you, because I think it's a very gray area in coaching that we don't discuss much. But we talk a lot about transformation. We talk a lot about, working with clients to transform who they are, how they approach things, how they see things, their relationship, how they relate to things. And most of our clients come in with pretty rock solid worldviews in some way, right? And let me give you some examples of some of those worldviews, perhaps. In order to belong, I need to always be useful. I need to control everything so all hell doesn't break loose. That's just a couple of examples. I've got more for you. However, these are sponsoring beliefs that inform just about everything our clients do and say, and how they approach things and how they perceive things. And so when we talk about transformation, a lot of times in coaching, the transformation comes from the client having the ability to look at these beliefs that they hold and to be able to make a choice about them. Because most of us operate in life with beliefs that we never had a choice in. We inherited them, we adopted them, we had experiences that formed them, and they became subconsciously created, but inform just about everything we do, everything we say, how we relate, and everything. And so in coaching, and you've all done it, I'm sure, right? You ask questions that start to disrupt some of those beliefs. We don't talk about this enough because I think sometimes what happens too, coaches get really attached to seeing that transformation happen in the coaching relationship. And so sometimes we'll start to inject leading questions because we're seeing patterns and we're making assumptions about what that worldview or belief may be. And so today, what I'd like to talk about are what is this and where are the lines around this? I mean, there's ethical considerations in this too, if we really want to talk real about it. So there, Blue, I just threw it out on the table. What do you guys think?
I guess I'll speak. I mean, questioning beliefs, that's a major part of coaching.
Yeah.
Like, people are stuck in their beliefs. And so I absolutely do think we should be noticing when the client is saying a belief and intuiting whether it's an opportunity to actually question whether that belief is really true, if that's actually a belief that they want to maintain. possibly where that belief came from, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, depends on the conversation. There could be a lot of discussion around it, but certainly starting with detecting when the client is saying a belief,
Yeah.
and then depending on where the conversation is going, what to do with that. Yeah.
So that's a great point, Stan. Like first we need to detect, is this a belief? Is this a sponsoring belief? Or is this, yeah. And then there's the big question. What do we want to do with that? And I'm going to add one other piece to this too. What's our level of responsibility with that? And I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. Neil, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Stan. I think in the times that have been the most powerful, impactful in my coaching sessions, I think that the client has a way of showing you that they want to be challenged.
Mm.
A lot of times, if I even mention, it's not that I'm asking permission, but I might just say, I'd like to challenge you on this.
Hmm.
You can see them like, yes, please, I'm begging for that.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
that is something that I kind of lean into. But like if I see someone who's like, oh, okay, like I might not push as much. I might kind of uh just temper how I'm challenging them, right, in their view. Um, and then sometimes, like yesterday, I had a client first time client who we were going through just an example of a values exercise. And this person responded pretty strongly that, well, I don't understand how these values help. Like value to me, are you Christian? Because I'm Christian, and virtues and vices are how I see the world. So like those are my values. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
like they're gonna let you know if they don't want to be pushed on certain things, and if they potentially, in this case, need a someone who is faith-based to help guide them on their journey. So it's yeah, it kind of varies, but I find that they kind of let you know one way or another.
So I'm hearing in that, Neil, that the coach needs to have discernment to be able to discern exactly how is the client responding to me, even poking in there a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Body
Okay.
language, their actual like speech, etc.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. Great. Shakti.
And hi, thank you. I really like what you just said, what you've both just shared, and what Neil just shared made me wonder. So when we become discerning, how can that become problematic? Because it becomes almost like a judgment or a perspective that I'm imposing from my understanding or assumptions of a behavior. If somebody's doubtful in how they respond to you,
Yeah.
where does that say that that response is not as strong as when they show up and say, yes, challenge me?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it becomes a bit blurry for me, and it feels like it's too much from me, and bringing my perspective on top of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I said, this is a wiggly area here, right? And we don't talk about it enough. So that's a great point, Shakti. Thanks. Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just listening to the conversation. I'm wondering if, in the very beginning of our coaching relationships, even at the agreement stage, should we ask questions about how our client likes to be challenged, and maybe kind of address that up front so that we know how to best challenge them, if that makes sense.
That's a great point, Laura. And also, as you were saying that, I'm thinking, do we need to have conversations with them about how they want to push back and and give them some sort of permission early on to be able to push back if we're going places they're not feeling comfortable with. And I say all this because I've been thinking a lot about this lately. And I think, when we look at, when I say something as dramatic as worldview, and to your point, Neil, with your client the other day who had Christian values that they were very dedicated to. These are like load-bearing walls in homes, right? And if we just start walking over there and pulling off a piece of drywall or, poke it into the studs behind the drywall or whatever, I think that we have a level of responsibility to really know what we're doing in that versus just kind of poking around and hoping for the best. Neil, go ahead.
I think to respond to that, I agree. It it kind of for me, like some of the examples that you gave at the start of this talk, that those are things that I would have absolutely spoken to my clients about, brought up,
Yeah.
challenged them to grow. And uh the one yesterday was just one where it was those, foundational pieces of them that I wasn't comfortable with pushing any kind of other view into.
Mhm.
And I honestly did not have the perspective of someone who is Christian
Yeah.
to know how to navigate within there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's what I mean when we have to assess and adapt.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just never a clear-cut thing, but not necessarily assessing and how do I get around this and force it, but more just this question, should I?
Yeah. Yeah. That's the big question. Should I? And to how much? Yeah.
Can
Thanks,
I
Neil.
say
Joe.
some? Can I say something here before Joe and Mary and Kristen here? Um, like when Amy was saying about the drywall, right? And my sense is I am not the one who ever changes the drywall, right? I'm not the one who is going to be putting holes or taking sheet rock or not. Um, but my role is to say, oh, there is a drywall here, right? It's to notice what is this drywall about? Uh, what is the function of this load-bearing wall here? And question that. If I simply um, there is a concept, there is a worldview, and I see, or I have a sense of how is this wall here in this floor plan interfering or contributing to the flow of living in this house. I may bring this up. What is this wall about? But the decision of who is going to change or if we are going to address the drywall or not is up to the client. Make sense?
I'm going to come back to that after Joe and Mary go here in a second. Go ahead, Joe.
Just adding on to the analogy, as long as we're building things or tearing things down, immediately made me think that this change isn't always about tearing down, removing, or calling something out that's wrong. And in fact, I've been thinking a lot about how inspiring new thought or evoking new thinking on a client, for it to take, it needs to connect to something they already know. So as you think about a worldview, today's example was a client said, I'm impatient, and that's one of my superpowers.
Huh.
And where he landed was actually, I have a bias for action. But
Yeah.
if my colleagues perceive me as impatient, it doesn't always serve me. So that's an additive version of his worldview, I think. I don't know. I'm
Beautiful.
right there.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's great example, Joe. Thank you for that. Mary, go ahead. So curious about being impatient being a superpower, but that's another topic. We'll talk more, Joe.
Bias for action.
I know. Yeah, nice euphemism. This whole topic of disruption and stretching our client's worldview, it just reinforces for me just how hard change is for people.
Mhm.
And change and growth being what we do for a living, basically, just how hard it is to help people, not move on, but evolve.
Yeah.
How has that served you? That belief, um, that tenant, whatever it might be, how has that served you? And maybe the person has outgrown it. And maybe that's what's shaking them into coaching in the first place.
Yeah.
But for me, this whole idea of this, disrupting their worldview, this comes back to something really fundamental. And I think disruption can be the whole conversation in the exploratory
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
leads to, okay, now what do I do with this?
Yeah. I love what you said.
Incremental or
Sorry, Mary, I thought you were done.
yeah. Oh, go ahead, Elias.
This whole aspect when you said that maybe they have outgrown it. This is so beautiful because how many low-bearing walls do we have? We all carry labels that we talk about this in our training program, labels that we have been carrying since we were kids. And we firmly believe that this is the truth. This is our worldview. But those labels or those load-bearing walls don't serve us. We can put a beam over there and the flow of the house is going to be much, much better. And it is in coaching that we are going to be able to notice, oh yeah, I don't need this load-bearing wall. I don't need this label. I don't need this view. And I can live without it, or I can change it. That's what we're doing there, supporting the client to see what is needed or what is not needed, or what is the plan of the house that they want for themselves today.
So speaking of seeing, you're all very blurry to me right now because I just came back from my ophthalmology appointment. So hopefully what I wrote in the chat is indeed well spelled. But for me, what comes up for me during this conversation is what I think, and Amy alluded to it in the beginning of our conversation, like what is really influencing their beliefs, because beliefs can be pretty entrenched, pretty heavily ingrained. And yes, and some may outgrow those beliefs, but I think when many of my clients come from the military and talk about, so I hear their beliefs are very powerful and something that is very hard for them to give up because either they were rewarded by it and or they had to live by it, right? So that's just an example of how beliefs can become entrenched, just the military alone, and just thinking about the environment you grew up in, whether it was impoverished, affluent, whatever, and what your family valued, and going back to values, and sometimes relative to challenge, if I hear the belief, what would the opposite be? And how comfortable are you with thinking about what the opposite, or what would be different if you were to think about it in a different way? So that's what is noodling in my mind right now, as I listen to this conversation.
Yeah, great, Kristen. Yeah, absolutely. Stan, go ahead.
Yeah, I hold the belief that a belief is just a thought and that we can choose our beliefs ultimately. Um, and so yeah, so I and not all beliefs are bad. Like we've talked about, a number of people have talked about beliefs that support who they choose to be. who the client chooses to be. So if I hear a belief that, and this is my judgment coming in, if I hear a belief that I judge as being potentially not in alignment with who the client really wants to be, then I may question that, and then just simply ask the client, is that a belief you want to keep?
Yeah.
Like I come from the opinion that we can actually do something about it. So from that opinion, is that something you want to keep, or is that something you want to change? And then we get into a conversation. I tend to use Byron Katie's model either directly or loosely in this conversation, just because it's one of the easiest models I've found to address, whether or not the client chooses to believe something, or looking at the opposite belief and really feeling what the client, having the client feel in their body what they really would like to believe.
And this is all great. I mean, this is great stuff. And I love that we've identified, beliefs can be very positive too. And we go to Joe's situation there where the client collapsed a belief with identity, right? And in your coaching process, that was separated, right? And what he really wound up articulating was something that he felt was important and valued, and that was action. Versus, I'm an impatient person. That is an identity that collapsed into a belief that collapsed into an identity. And I think this is where we get into tricky business here sometimes, is that the beliefs have deep, deep roots, and they're wound around rocks and soil and everything else. And when we introduce, do you want to believe, well, here's the opposite. Let's look all these other things we talked about here, right? And the client looks at that and says, yeah, oh yeah, that's true for me. Yeah. What happens then? Does magic just occur? No, usually they'll keep repeating, right? Because these beliefs have deep, deep roots and subconscious roots. They've never thought about it. They've inherited these beliefs, or they were coping mechanisms, or whatever they were. And so I think as coaches, we have to be aware of that, because a lot of times I think we get these moments in coaching where we have an experience like that, and then the client seems to have the aha moment, but the behavior doesn't follow, or then they're off to something else, right? Or whatever. And so I don't have an answer here. I'm throwing this out. What's the responsibility of the coach to revisit that and hold the client accountable to that aha they had?
Amy, maybe this could, I couldn't find my raise my hand little icon, so forgive me for just jumping in. Maybe this gets at this idea a little bit, but what keeps coming up for me, especially on the heels of what you said, Stan, and what you just triggered, Amy, is that beliefs, to me, they're a version of a story that we're telling. I'm interested, that's helpful, and I'm interested in the realities of how they see those beliefs playing out. Yeah. What is the evidence? What is the day-to-day? And so while I find it useful for them to share a version of a story they've told themselves, I find it useful not just for the sake of the story, but so that I can help them hear them track the story to the realities of the lived experiences. I find that consistently, it's not about whether or not they believe the beliefs, it's the unfolding of the stories that the realities of their experiences day to day that then give them space to start questioning, whether outright or through the course of the conversation, well, is that a belief? Should I be holding on to that belief? Is that story worth holding on to at this point? Or am I tracking somewhere totally differently? So, yeah, so I just feel like there's so much to uncover in getting beyond sort of the surface level of what this idea of the story of self is that they hold, and just starting to dig into the everyday experiences and whether or not they track.
Yeah, David, that's so interesting because as you're talking, I think a question too can be, what's at stake if you let go of this belief, right? And if these beliefs are load-bearing walls, what's going to hold up the roof while you're dismantling that? So I kind of heard that in what you were saying. Is that hitting the mark?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting. Stan, go ahead.
Give me a moment because I just got lost in David's comments and now I'm like remembering what I was trying to say. Um, oh, you were asking about responsibility. What's our
Yeah.
responsibility?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't tend to use that word in myself when I'm coaching much because I mean it's our responsibility to have a coaching mindset. And beyond that, I'm not sure I hold much responsibility like, oh, it's my responsibility to say certain things or whatever, but I think it is my responsibility as a coach to help the client become more aware of themselves so that they can do their own coaching in the future. Like that's kind of
Yeah.
a core belief I have,
Yeah.
speaking of beliefs. And within that, it depends on the context. Like, is it my responsibility to bring up the belief this time or the next time? I mean, that really is just based on my intuition of where the conversation's going. When you ask that question, it's interesting. I do remember a couple coaching conversations where on the surface, on the outside, I could have been viewed as a bit of an asshole because I was like, is that another belief? Is that another belief? Is that another belief? But it was in context where the
Yeah.
client really was like getting it and really working on it. And that was where they were at. But other times I absolutely let it go because it's not supporting that part of the conversation with the client.
Yeah.
Does that
I have to
make
make
sense?
I have to make a comment here, Stan. I so appreciate that the responsibility, right? It sometimes I feel that the some coaches get into this idea. I have to create transformation. I'm here to challenge. There is something. I'm gonna go to this house plan, right? This floor plan, and my goal, my responsibility here is to change the floor plan. And what are the walls that need to be changed? That's not what coaching is, right? That's not what we are here about. We are there to observe. And then maybe there is a low-bearing wall right here that is preventing the flow from the living room to the kitchen, going with the analogy. And we may think that, removing that wall and putting a beam there, will make the flow much better. But that's my perception. That's my judgment. And that has no place in coaching at all. I may say that there is a low bearing wall here. What do you think of it? And the client may have a perfect reason for that wall to be in that space, and they want the wall to be there. And it's not for me to challenge them. It's for me to play with the floor plan that they want for themselves. I appreciate that nuance of responsibility. Thank you, Stan.
Cindy, go ahead.
I think as I've been listening, it takes me back to what is the goal and what was the confirmation of or conversation that's leading to confirmation of what the client wants.
Mm-hmm.
And as you ask the question, like, is it our responsibility? Like, what do we do with it? Prefacing what you said, I have listened to conversations where it's been a coach call. We're listening to a coach call, learning from it, and noticing that the coach has been with this client for a while. And maybe that belief was there, and all of a sudden they brought that belief in. So I think that's a part of, for me, that lands for that responsibility is, okay, we now have this relationship. We know what their goal is. They are the one leading. But it is, I think, our responsibility to say, we have talked about this. We have noticed this. Where does that land or hit right now, at least in this moment or conversation?
and relative to what you want to accomplish. Is what I heard loud and clear in that. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Cindy. Neil.
I guess I have more of a question. So, thinking about our responsibility to meet the client where they're at, to be, as Elias was saying, that kind of the curious observer, who's just kind of vocalizing some of those observations. Where does that partnership of the client needing to bring a certain growth mindset, how does that play into this, and what is our responsibility with respect to helping them cultivate that mindset?
That's a great question.
I think that the way I would respond to that question, Neil, is maybe the growth mindset is my bias. Maybe the client is okay with the fixed mindset that they are carrying right now. So going back to that analogy of the low-bearing wall that I so much love it, apparently, I may ask a question about the low-bearing wall, and the client said, "Well, this low-bearing wall is perfect." And I, as a coach, my responsibility is to accept that. However, we continue the coaching, we continue to put the furniture in the living room, and then the client is saying, "Yeah, but then, when I'm cooking, I can't talk with people in the living room." I say, "Oh, yeah, there is a low-bearing wall here that is preventing you from this." "Oh, no, yeah, no, but we are not touching the low-bearing wall." "Okay, we're not touching the low-bearing wall. Okay, so let's go to the bedroom and let's go to the yard, and we may go, and then the client goes back to the kitchen, and the client saying like, "Yes, but I'm cooking here and I don't know what's happening in the living. Oh, there is a low-bearing wall here." Like that's my responsibility. And then the client is saying, "Okay, I'm not removing this low-bearing wall, but I'm going to put a hole here." Okay, that's what the client is. My responsibility is to observe and to bring it up when it's necessary, right? But I am not there to modify anything. I'm not there. I need to be very mindful of the bias that low-bearing wall needs to go. This is not my role. And we need to understand that this low-bearing wall that for me doesn't work may be the perfect thing for the client. And we need to accept that.
Joe.
I'm right on board with all of that. And I'm thinking of upstream of ever going into the house. Are we walking into the right house? So one of the turns I'm trying to make in my practice is to remember that it's also my responsibility to make sure I'm working with the right clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're constantly focused on that wall and they're not willing to look at it, maybe it's not the right client. But it could be that everyone here is just assuming we've got the right client in the room. So I just want to throw that out because it's
it's a great point to bring in. Yeah. Because there are certain clients we all do our best work with. And I know coaches that have the patience of Job, of which I do not have. That is my identity. And it's legit. But can do much better work with clients that want to just keep walking around that wall. And I think that's a very legitimate point to bring into this.
But Amy, then as coaches, when do we get to a point where, because that to me right away went to client is stuck and they don't want to go beyond it. Client doesn't want to do anything with it. And that's okay because client knows best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then when do we pause that? Because as a coach, and I don't know if this is the right word or not, but can I really be effective with that person?
Yeah, I think that
What is
that goes to coachability, I think. And one of the things we've said for years about coachability, some people will just blanket and say that person's not coachable. And that's legit. There are times where pathology and other things are involved where they're not coachable in general. However, and we've all run against this in our practices, there are areas clients are not coachable in at that time. And a lot of times, in working with them, when they are coachable in other areas, right, and they're making progress and they're making shifts and they're shifting their beliefs and their perceptions of things, it's almost a gearing up of courage to look at the big wall, right? That they build in working in developing and bolstering other areas, I think. And then we're going to go back to Joe's comment. Do you have the patience as the coach, though, to wait it out if it ever comes? And how long do you, I don't have answers, by the way, when I'm asking these questions. I'm just telling you, how long do you let the client keep bumping into that wall over and over and over again and do nothing about it? Which is a big question mark.
I love the point you made about courage, and it took me back to Choice Magazine from, I don't know, 2 months ago about choice and the clients choosing comfort versus the courage to do something.
Yeah.
Shatki put a question on the chat that I think that you're going to bring this up, Shatki, and I so appreciate that. I want to go back to that core principle of coaching that I always share in coach training and every time I am facilitating mentoring and training. There is nothing to fix, right? That idea that there is nothing to fix. The client is perfect. And that low-bearing wall that we may perceive as disruptive and it's not supposed to be there, our mindset is that that low-bearing wall may be the perfect wall for the client. And who am I to say that it's not? Right? Our role is to ask. There is a low-bearing wall here that disrupts the flow between the living room and the kitchen. An open floor plan, in my perception, would be perfect, but the client does not want that. And that may be perfect for that client. I don't need to disrupt that. But my responsibility, I would say, is to ask, what is this about?
Shakti, go ahead.
Thank you for saying that, Elias. And it's such a difficult concept for me to sometimes just actually live. I'm going to say something here that I truly believe, but that I think it's harder for me to bring to life, is just that almost a lot of the thoughts that I can have in the coaching experience with the client have like a whole bunch of assumptions and things built around them that come from my own beliefs and my own history and my own humanity. And that's true for every human being. We're not robots. And even robots are built off of a certain subset of humanities that it fed off of. So I think that at the end of the day, this is where that just not question, maybe, or constantly questioning. And I think it was David or Stan who said, or Joe who said, somebody said that you're being an asshole by asking, is that a belief? Is that a belief? But it's the constant questioning of the thing that is coming up and whether I am the kind of person as a coach who actually wants to coach that way. Is that who I am am I okay with coaching in that way? Elias, you always say coaching and the competencies are all about how we bring them to, I think that's how I interpret what you say. How do we bring them to life as our own individual human beings that we are? And each of us have a different way of showing up. And we're going to have a different way of wanting to work and connecting with people. And I do like to kind of question things. I think sometimes I don't have the courage to question enough, or to just kind of, like recognize when I have assumptions as a coach. So that's something that I want to work on. But I know technically that is true. I know technically I believe all these things. Bringing it to life is a whole different ball game. But that's kind of what I feel about that wall, and whether the client wants to do something with the wall, or even thinks it is a wall. By the way, that client they could think it's one of those those space dividers that are full of, that you just kind of walk through. I don't know what you call those things, like hanging beads or something.
That's such a great point, Shakti. The idea, I may even perceive that is a wall, and for the client, it's not even a wall, right? It's something else. Yes, the idea here, like, my job as a coach is not to fix. My job as a coach is not to change layouts, or my job as a coach is to observe and to ask questions and to point it out. And I think that the reason why we are bringing this up here at Prime Hour today is because what you said, Shakti, this idea that when are we shying away from asking the question? I'm seeing a wall here. What is that wall about? Right? And how important it is for us to not shy away from questions that may be challenging to the client, and understand when, how, what is the level of trust and safety that has been created, so that we are able to ask questions that may be a little bit on the edge, but those are the questions that will support the client, say, yeah, wow, this is a wall that I really want to get rid of.
Neil.
I feel like, one, this is a really good conversation, by the way. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate some things that Shakti had mentioned, and Elias' response, because I think it answered some of this kind of follow-up question I have, which is really around it's basically around what Shakti was talking about, and the comfort level, like knowing ourselves as a coach, knowing what what are our discomforts, and when do we want to sit with those discomforts versus shying away from them or pushing through them. And I guess that's the interesting piece for me, is like there's an aspect to what we do that feels like, okay, like as a coach, as any coach, I have a responsibility to X, Y, and Z. As a human being, in my unique way, like I have to have my own boundaries as well. I have to have my own, respect those boundaries, and have constant self-assessment and adaptation. And I guess there's so many different viewpoints that I'm hearing today, and it's like everybody's painting a Bob Ross painting right now, but they're all a little different if you look at all of our screens, right? So that's, I guess that's kind of what I've heard from the last few comments, and I was going to ask a question, but that's kind of what I gained from it, I guess. So
That's wonderful, Neil. And I'm here thinking that, yes, there are the coaches who shy away from asking a challenging question, and there are also the coaches that only look for the challenge. Right? What is happening inside of me as a coach, in my perspective, in my worldview, that is making me show up in front of my client with those biases towards less challenging or too challenging, right? And how can I understand more about who I am so that I am there not for me and for my biases and for my insecurities or for my go get it, but I'm there for my client, for what the client needs in that moment, right? That's why personal integrity, we have in the prime program that we have the whole process of personal integrity, the whole aspect of looking inside of us, who we are, what are the things that are disrupting our thinking, what are our own worldviews, how is this affecting the moment that I show up in front of a client. That is so much in parallel to simply learning coaching skills. Suzanne,
I can't figure out where the hand raising thing is. That's pretty bad.
now you found out. It's just this.
I know, but it's not showing up on mine for some odd reason. I'm looking.
You just use your regular hand.
Okay. Well, I liked Cindy's question about the difference between the coaching and the therapy. I was thinking about that all along. The first time I was coached, I went through a divorce, went through therapy, all that stuff with somebody who was like, it's going to be okay. You're going to be good, who helped bolster me and my self-esteem. And then I went to someone who was like a coach. And I said something about John. She says, we're not saying his name again. We're not talking about him anymore. I could have at that point put the wall up and say, no, I want him back, or I want to make my marriage work, or something stupid like that. Or I took her advice and she paused. She looked at me when she said, we're only going to talk about you from now on. And I said, okay. And I was ready. But I hear what you're talking about, because I have several clients right now who have those aha moments, and I get so excited, and then they don't do the action plan. They don't do, and then I'll go back and ask that question again. Well, how are you going to feel if you don't start that new business, or if you don't move in that direction? They go, oh, but I have to. But then they won't. And Elias knows that I'm a newer coach, but that is a frustration. I think he's ready. Like Cindy was saying, I think he's ready, but I just don't know. Do I be as forceful as the woman you were talking about, being authentic, your authentic self, or do you wait?
Do you have an answer to that, David? Because Laura's next in line. We'll let you weigh in there real fast.
I'll hold it. Go ahead, Laura.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, because I was going to go back to Elias's comment earlier. So go ahead.
My thought is about this idea of forcefulness and connecting it, Elias, to what I think you were just suggesting is there's different types of questions, and we can stay in a space that is observant and still bold in the forcefulness of the questioning. So, Suzanne, it's interesting the approach that the coach took in outright saying, we're not going to say John's name. My thought was there's probably a way to invite you to have a similar thought, maybe in a less leading or direct way, that is a forceful enough question, that's an honest question. I guess my point is there's a line somewhere where if we stay in that observant questioning mode, we can still challenge and be forceful, I think was the word that came up, but yet somehow walk that line of neutrality. Not all questions are soft. Not all questions are just a simple invitation to just expound and go somewhere for the client, right? It's with purpose. So I just keep thinking about how we stay in this open-minded space while also recognizing that we can be forceful in really direct and powerful questions.
Oh my God, it is so beautiful. And sorry, Laura, we're going to get to you. Sometimes when we use the word challenge, right? That word challenge seems like it has to be bold, right? Challenge, like just asking the client, like, what do you want to talk about today? That can be a challenge in itself, right? The word challenge here does not necessarily mean that it has to be bold, but what you just said, David, be open so that when it's time to be bold, we are free to go there But when it's time not to be bold, we're free not to go there either, right? It's neither or, but there is an openness inside of us that we can go bold or not bold. But whatever we are doing, we are supporting the client into stretching and moving and discovering and exploring and seeing what is best for them. Laura.
Yeah, actually, this discussion has kind of helped at least partially answer my question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway to see if there are any other thoughts. You talked earlier about based on our temperament, some of us are going to be more comfortable challenging constantly. Some of us are going to be more comfortable or less comfortable challenging, if you will. What are some ways that we as coaches, I mean, it's important that we can go, that full gamut in order to address our clients' needs and help support our clients. So how do you suggest as coaches, if we're on one end of the spectrum, how do we work on being more flexible in that approach?
Hire a mentor coach. Because it is right there. Well, it's understanding ourselves. It's understanding what is preventing me from asking that challenging question, or what is making me always be searching for the challenge, right? Like it's with the reflection that we do within ourselves that we are going to be more at ease navigating through the spectrum, depending on what is really needed with the client and what is my bias.
Great, thank you.
I can't believe that we are 5 minutes away from the top of the hour. This is beautiful. Neil.
So maybe this is a conversation for a future Prime Hour, but kind of to what Suzanne was saying. A lot of times, I coach a lot of people with ADHD and OCD, as I myself have those. I was diagnosed with those last year. But I've had it for 42 years. I guess a lot of times in those situations, there are tools, mechanisms approaches that you can share that might be helpful for them. I guess when it comes to coaching, like anyone who, might exhibit something that looks like a symptom of something, but like it's just a challenge that they're a wall that they've put up, right? Are there specific times when coaches should feel okay sharing those types of tools and mechanisms if that might help the client help themselves get over a wall that they want to get over but are struggling with?
Definitely another topic here. Yeah. And this idea of sharing information with the client. We do have a whole module in our level 2 program that talks about the moment and how to share information with the client. I'm going to be very mindful here of I have a couple of things to share with you before you go. Registration is still open for our level 1 and our level 2 program. Our level 2 program, we opened the classroom yesterday, but if you are still thinking of joining us for level 2, we can still put you in within this week. And our level 1 program also, it's open, and we are going to start that next month. We also have open registration for my Prime Bridge, and the Prime Bridge is the group mentor coaching that I offer just twice a year, and there is only 6 openings for that. Actually, there are only 4 openings now. So if you would like to participate in the Prime Bridge, let me know as well. Our next Prime Hour will be September 10th at the same time at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure that you join us for Prime Hour as well. And don't forget to subscribe, review, like our Prime Space podcast that now we are in our 5th season, and I'm releasing episodes every Tuesday. So make sure that you listen to those podcasts. And if you would like to be a guest in the podcast, let me know as well. I would love to have a conversation with you about that. Amy, how are we going to close this?
I think this is just a close. I just want to thank all of you for bringing your wisdom into this room today. This was a complex topic, and I just love what all of you brought. And I was really curious to see where this was going to go. And I personally am not disappointed at all. So thank you for that, and thanks for your willingness to hang in there with a complex topic like this. So that's it for me. We will see all of you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.